Every year around Halloween time, I like to step outside of my comfort zone a little bit and take in a little bit of horror content. So this year, I thought it would be fun to play through Parasite Eve on the original PlayStation. Now this game is actually a sequel to a Japanese novel which was also called Parasite Eve, and it was also adapted into a movie a little bit after it was written. Now I've never read the book or seen the movie, but I do think it's a little bit funny that Parasite Eve is the sequel to Parasite Eve. And before I really dive into the review, if you enjoy this video, please let me know by giving it a thumbs up and tell me about it in the comments down below. That sort of thing really helps me out a lot. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. I upload every other Saturday. Follow me on Twitter. I'll make sure to leave a link to that in the description box. And now let's get into it. The first time that I saw this game was around when it was first released. I would have been around 8 or 9 years old at the time. And I remember that my friend's mom bought it for herself and she didn't let us play it. But we did manage to sneak a peek at it just long enough for us to watch the intro. So between then and my late 20s, I always remembered this game as that one game with the intro where an opera singer kills a bunch of people. So when I started collecting RPGs on the PS1, this was one of the first that I picked up. The game's development staff includes many of the same people who worked on Final Fantasy VII, including Hironobu Sakaguchi, who served as the producer for both games. The game also uses some ideas from Final Fantasy VII that were either cut or changed while the game was still in early development. The most obvious of these being that when it first started development, Final Fantasy VII was going to be set in New York City in the year 1999, and the main character was going to be a detective named Joe. Parasite Eve takes place in New York City in the year 1999, and the main character is a detective named Aya Bria. So they just took that original idea, changed the sex of the protagonist, and tweaked things to work as a sequel for the novel and movie. And it isn't at all necessary to read the book or see the movie to be able to play the game and follow along with the story. The gameplay sort of combines elements of survival horror and JRPGs. Think of it like Final Fantasy meets Resident Evil. However, unlike Final Fantasy, you can actually move around the battle area to avoid enemy attacks, and unlike Resident Evil, you'll probably never run out of ammo. In general, the survival horror elements are pretty light here. The game has fixed camera angles, gothic-inspired artwork, and limited inventory space, but that's really about it. The music is composed by Yoko Shimomura, who would later go on to compose the soundtrack for Kingdom Hearts. The music in this game is really good, but it doesn't really do a whole lot to add to that horror atmosphere, and that's something that music can play a huge role in. There are a good few tracks that really help to build the tension, but some of the others are more relaxing than anything else to me, especially the battle theme. The battle system feels a lot like the Final Fantasy games released around the late 90s, where the ATB meter is replaced with an AT bar, which serves as the exact same purpose. Once it fills up, you're able to take an action. And what's really nice is that when the AT bar is filled, you don't have to attack the enemy right away. And actually a lot of the time, it's best to hold off on attacking until the timing is just right. And when you're firing your weapon, you are forced to stay in place as Aya aims her shot. Every weapon has a specific amount of times that it can be fired before Aya has to reload. And just like while shooting, you're not able to move while reloading. So most battles end up having the same general flow. Run around the battlefield avoiding enemy attacks, and shoot when you have a clear shot. Magic is called PE, which stands for Parasite Energy, and Aya gets new PE abilities as she levels up. The only PE abilities that I used during my playthrough were the healing abilities. I found that guns were able to get the job done for pretty much every encounter. The PE meter charges over time during battle, but much slower than the AT bar. So if you're good at avoiding enemy attacks, you'll never really have to worry about running out of PE. As you level up, you'll receive bonus points that you can use to upgrade your inventory space or your AT bar. Upgrading the AT bar makes it go up faster, so I put most of my bonus points into that. The AT bar continues to go up as you fire your weapon and reload it. So if you have a weapon that you're able to fire several times in one round before reloading, and a fast enough AT bar, you can basically keep firing non-stop for the entire battle. There's some basic weapon customization that's actually kind of fun to mess around with. Every once in a while, you'll find an item called a tool, and you can use one of these tools to transfer either effects or stats from one weapon to another. Doing this will destroy the item that the effect or stats are coming from, so you can't really do a whole lot of it, but you can make some very, very powerful weapons this way. The graphics are probably the part of the game that has aged the worst. I personally really like the look of low polygon 3D character models against static pre-rendered backgrounds. It's sort of the signature look of the PS1. But if you're more used to the way that video games look now, this one really shows its age. Even though the graphics and visuals don't hold up very well these days, the story and characters definitely do. The characters all have very strong personalities that still manage to come through despite the graphical limitations, and the fear that they all feel, which is sort of what drives them all forward, is very believable. The story follows a New York detective named Aya Brea as she fights against a monster named Eve, who is a manifestation of mitochondria that have evolved and are trying to eliminate nucleic-based life. It all takes place over the course of about 6 days, and most days have the same basic structure. Roughly 20 to 30 minutes or so of exposition during the day, followed by a good hour or so of actual gameplay at night, which is usually in some sort of large and explorable environment. There are a few parts in the story where you can select your next destination from a map of the city, but there really isn't any reason to go anywhere except for where the next story beat is until about day 5 or so, which is when a few optional areas open up. This is one of those PS1 games where pre-rendered cinematic cutscenes are constantly popping up. The back of the game case claims that this is a cinematic RPG, and with the amount of cutscenes both in-game and pre-rendered, they aren't kidding. It takes about 8 to 10 hours or so to play through this game, but probably about a quarter of that time is spent watching cutscenes. Even though the graphics have aged quite a bit over the years, this game is still a lot of fun to play through. The gameplay doesn't feel anywhere near as dated as the graphics do, and the story still holds up very well. And with Halloween coming around the corner, this is the perfect time of year to play through the game, and I highly recommend it if you have the ability to play through it. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.